In 1720, Sir Isaac Newton, the man who decoded the universe, lost his life savings in a stock market scam. A verified genius, ruined by one impulsive illusion. Fast forward to you, you're educated, you track expenses, yet at 2 a.m., you throw money at useless subscriptions. You cling to toxic relationships simply because you already invested years into them. You construct venomous arguments just to win a petty fight, destroying a peaceful evening. You call it stupidity. You sit in the dark and label yourself irrational. Stop the self-loathing. Your intellect is not broken. The brutal truth is that your brain was never designed to find logic or financial freedom. It is a ruthless, energy-hoarding machine programmed for prehistoric survival. What you call a shameful cognitive bias is actually your prefrontal cortex executing a desperate thermal cooldown to prevent a physiological collapse. Today, we tear apart the illusion of free will. We will expose the algorithm silently sabotaging your life and hand you the veto code to stop your mind from betraying you. Welcome to the greatest deception ever sold to the modern adult. The entire self-help industry has convinced you that you are a rational creature capable of absolute logic. They teach you to pause, evaluate the hard facts, and make objective choices. You download complex budgeting applications to track every penny. You memorize relationship psychology textbooks to communicate better. You vow to never again fall into the trap of the sunk cost fallacy, or let your ego destroy a negotiation. You firmly tell yourself that sheer willpower and strict discipline are enough to defeat your impulsive habits. Wrong. Willpower is not some noble philosophical virtue hovering in the ether. It is a highly expensive, exhaustible biological resource. Every single time you force your mind to analyze a dense spreadsheet, every time you bite your tongue to avoid screaming at your partner during a stressful evening, every time you resist the urge to click purchase on an item you do not need. Your prefrontal cortex burns a massive amount of metabolic energy. You calculate, you endure, you optimize, you suppress your primal instincts to fit into a civilized mold. And then you inevitably collapse. By 5 p.m, your cognitive bandwidth is completely bankrupt. Society looks at this exhaustion and calls it a lack of personal discipline. They label you as weak and irrational when you finally snap at your spouse over a misplaced coffee cup, or when you stubbornly hold on to a failing financial investment simply because the pain of admitting defeat is too sharp. But these societal judges are completely blind to the brutal thermodynamics of the human mind. The unglamorous truth is that your brain consumes 20% of your daily caloric intake while only making up 2% of your total body weight. When that metabolic fuel runs low after a day of endless micro-decisions, the system must forcefully terminate all high-level analytical processing just to keep your heart beating and your lungs expanding. It forcibly switches you from manual driving to a ruthless biological autopilot. This is exactly the moment where cognitive biases seize control. A bias is not a shameful defect in your character. A bias is a mathematical shortcut designed by nature to save precious calories. It is a desperate thermal cooldown protocol triggered by a suffocating system. The self-improvement gurus intentionally hide this mechanical reality from you. Acknowledging the absolute physical limits of your biology would instantly ruin their billion-dollar market of endless self-optimization. They actively want you to feel guilty. They need you to believe that your bad decisions are a profound moral failure, rather than a highly predictable neurochemical crash. So drop the heavy lead vest of intellectual guilt right now. Stop measuring your self-worth against an artificial standard of perfection that no organic creature can ever sustain. You are not a failing rational being. You are an exhausted survival machine successfully executing its prime directive in an environment it was never built to navigate. But understanding this social lie is only the first superficial layer of your vindication. To truly dismantle the illusion of control and reclaim your agency, we must abandon behavioral psychology entirely. We are diving much deeper. We are going straight into the dark, silent architecture of your cellular grid. Forget philosophy, forget your childhood trauma. We are stripping away your ego entirely. Look closely at the scan. Welcome to the cold, merciless laboratory of your own bloodstream. Picture the exact moment a financial portfolio plummets or a petty argument with your spouse escalates. You refuse to cut your losses. You scream, you double down. You think this is a choice? No, it is a biological hostage situation. Let us perform a micro-autopsy on that exact millisecond. The prefrontal cortex, your center of logic and empathy, runs on adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. It is the cellular currency of thought. But after a relentless day of modern stress, your ATP reserves are critically drained. Blood glucose plummets. Synaptic firing slows to the biological machine. Prolonged analytical thinking is not a virtue, it is a fatal metabolic hemorrhage. The brain perceives your attempt to rationally evaluate a crashing stock or empathize with a partner as an existential threat to its energy grid. It must stop the bleeding immediately, so it triggers an emergency circuit breaker, it shuts down the cortex and reroutes the remaining power to the amygdala. The primitive alarm system blares, vision narrows, adrenaline floods the vessels, cortisol spikes, soaking your neural pathways in a thick, toxic acid. The machine aggressively forces you into a cognitive bias. Why? Because biases are cheap. They require zero ATP. The sunk cost fallacy, stubbornly holding onto a bad investment, demands no new calculations. It simply recycles old neural pathways. The fundamental attribution error, blaming your partner instead of the circumstances, burns absolutely 0 calories compared to the heavy lifting of self-reflection. Your mind is violently cutting corners to prevent a total thermal meltdown. Your terrible financial decision or cruel words were not a manifestation of a flawed character. They were a successful physiological cooling protocol. By forcing you to be irrational, your nervous system conserved the last remaining drops of glucose required to keep your vital organs functioning. You did not fail. Your biology successfully executed an emergency shutdown to save you from severe oxidative stress. You are mechanically, mathematically, and biochemically exonerated. Look at the raw data. The cells do not care about your bank account or your marriage. They only care about survival. But this leaves a terrifying void. If your brain is perfectly executing a survival code by ruining your modern life, who actually wrote this brutal software? The answer does not exist in this century. To find the architect of your misery, we must rip you out of the modern world and drag your nervous system back into the darkest, most unforgiving era of human evolution. Rip your consciousness out of the year 2026. Erase the glowing screens, the collapsing portfolios, the digital bank accounts, and the complex marital expectations. We are dragging your nervous system back 200,000 years into the freezing heart of the Pleistocene epoch. Picture the ancestral plains. The wind is howling. The environment is an arena of absolute scarcity. In this frozen wasteland, energy is not a luxury. It is the sole currency of survival. If our prehistoric ancestors spent hours critically analyzing every rustling bush, they were eaten by apex predators. If they abandoned a half-butchered carcass simply because a newer, potentially better food source appeared on the horizon, they starved to death in the snow. To survive the merciless winters of deep history, nature had to hardwire a ruthless hoarding algorithm into our genetic code. The human brain was violently programmed to cling to whatever resources it had already acquired, no matter how toxic, because letting go meant certain death. It was programmed to make lightning fast, calorie-free judgments about other members of the tribe, categorizing them as threats or allies, because nuanced empathy during a famine was a fatal waste of glucose. This is the sacred blueprint of your DNA. It is a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering designed solely to keep you breathing. Now, snap back to the hyper-accelerated reality of the present day. You're walking around with a hunting and gathering software, trying to navigate a ruthless, artificially constructed digital casino. The profound tragedy of the modern adult is that we have built a civilization that explicitly weaponizes our evolutionary survival tactics. The stock market, the infinite algorithms, the predatory marketing tactics of the 21st century, they are all deliberately engineered by invisible architects to trigger your ancient fear of starvation. When you refuse to sell a collapsing stock, your brain is not being stupid. It genuinely believes it is protecting a precious food cache from a winter blizzard. When you ruthlessly blame your partner during a conflict, your amygdala is running the exact same tribal defense protocol that kept your ancestors from being slaughtered by rival clans. You are demanding that an ancient organ designed to survive famine and predators flawlessly execute complex financial risk management and advanced emotional regulation while being bombarded by millions of artificial data points every single second. It is a biological absurdity. We are systematically punishing a Pleistocene nervous system for its tragic inability to thrive in a digital hyperreality. You are the victim of a catastrophic chronological mismatch. Your foolish choices are not a testament to your weakness. They are the fierce echoes of a desperate lineage that survived the harshest conditions on the planet so that you could be here today. You are an evolutionary triumph trapped in a modern simulation that actively exploits your deepest instincts to generate profit. But now, the history lesson ends. Shut down the macro lens. Let the hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution completely fade into the background. Silence the evolutionary biology. Put away the charts of prehistoric timelines, the grand narratives of human survival, and the brutal mechanics of DNA. The massive scale of the universe and the tragedy of our species cannot soothe the immediate quiet ache in your chest right now. Zoom all the way back to the exact physical coordinates of the room you're sitting in. Feel the heavy weight of your exhausted body pressing into the chair. Listen to the absolute heavy silence of the present moment. Because right here, in this tiny, isolated fraction of space and time, the grand theories of science suddenly stop mattering. Breathe into the absolute stillness of this moment. Let the weight of your expectations completely dissolve into the silence. For years, you have waged an exhausting, invisible war against your own mind, punishing yourself for every impulsive purchase, every irrational argument, and every stubborn refusal to let go of a failing path. You have treated your humanity as a disease that needed to be cured by discipline. Tonight, that brutal self-interrogation ends. You are officially granted permission to resign from the suffocating pursuit of perfect rationality. The flawless, perfectly optimized adult that society demands you to be is nothing more than an exploitative illusion designed to keep you perpetually dissatisfied and endlessly consuming. Your clumsiness, your sudden fears, and your irrational attachments are not defects to be eradicated. They are the beautiful, fractured evidence of a biological machine that has fought relentlessly to keep you alive. Accept your brokenness, for a smooth and perfect surface offers no friction, and without friction, there is no grip to connect with another human soul. But inside this profound acceptance lies the ultimate gift of your existence. This is the hidden switch that the self-help industry refuses to hand you. By dismantling the illusion of your free will, by realizing that your cognitive biases are just blind thermodynamic equations, saving cellular energy, you are paradoxically set free. You are no longer the terrified passenger believing you are a terrible driver. You are the silent, untouchable observer, sitting quietly behind the machinery. You cannot stop the primitive alarm from ringing. You cannot prevent the cortisol from flooding your veins when your ego is threatened, nor can you stop the sudden magnetic urge to hold on to a sunk cost. The ancient software will always run, but now you hold the ultimate sovereign power of the human condition, which is the power of the veto. In the microscopic space between the chemical impulse and your physical reaction, you have the ability to simply watch the biological storm pass. You can look at your brain's clumsy, desperate attempt to protect you from a prehistoric famine, whisper a quiet word of gratitude to your nervous system, and then gently decline the command. You do not have to conquer the fear, and you do not have to fix the mechanism. You only have to witness it without obedience. The heavy chains of your biological destiny have been unlocked. You are entirely free to let the machine run its noisy diagnostic tests while your soul remains perfectly still. Yet, as the deep peace of this realization settles into your bones, a heavy shadow of responsibility begins to emerge. The universe has granted you the awareness to see the invisible wires controlling your life. Tomorrow morning, the artificial world will inevitably test this newfound sovereignty. The financial markets will fluctuate, a notification will flash, or a careless word will strike your deepest insecurities. The ancient chemicals will immediately rise in your throat, demanding your absolute compliance. When that unavoidable moment arrives, standing at the crossroads of biology and consciousness, what will you do? Will you comfortably fall back into the warm, familiar sleep of your genetic programming? Or will you bear the agonizing weight of your freedom and press the override switch? You have successfully unmasked the biology. You now hold the mechanical veto switch to your own chemical impulses. But do not let this sudden peace deceive you. Biology is merely the hardware of your existence. It is a blind, obedient machine reacting to a deeper code. The terrifying question that remains is this: who or what is actually holding the blueprint? Beyond the superficial letters of modern personality tests, beyond the comforting labels of extroverts and introverts, there is a much darker architecture at play. There are obscure ancient psychological archetypes living quietly in the basement of your subconscious. These hidden entities do not just influence your daily mood. They actively write the very algorithms your nervous system follows, predicting your financial failures and relationship sabotages with eerie, devastating accuracy. You have learned how the brain betrays you, but you still do not know the face of the commander ordering the betrayal. You are standing at a critical threshold. Will you spend the rest of your life fighting the physical symptoms of your poor decisions, or are you finally ready to look the actual architect in the eye? Leave a comment below declaring your choice. Choose to claim your autonomy, or choose to remain a blind passenger. Type your decision and seal your commitment to the truth. The biological storm has been temporarily silenced, but the invisible entity that summoned the storm is still hiding in the dark, watching your every move. What exactly is this obscure archetype, and how does it weaponize your identity against you? We will drag it into the light and shatter its control over your life in the next video.